It is such a delight to have this guest speaker with us today. One of the things that I have noticed over the course of the last few years is that people who start in one part of the New Thought teaching think that that's the only one, and that all the other parts of the New Thought teaching are different. And those are things like the Centers for Spiritual Living, or the Unity churches, or Hillside Chapel, or Agape. And our guest speaker today is somebody who started out in the Hillside Chapel with Barbara King in Atlanta, and then the Center for Spiritual Living with Kennedy Schultz in Atlanta, and is now a Unity minister. And so she's kind of got it all going on. She's part of the affiliated New Thought Network, yoga teacher, and a friend of mine. Please welcome Reverend Sanja Mathis.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Thank you, Reverend Bill, for that wonderful introduction, and so appropriate. Yes, we often think where we start is the only place to be, and it can be quite a revelation when we understand that there's so much more, and we have access to all of it. As Bill said, I'm putting my timer on, because although I'm New Thought now, I was raised Baptist, and those ways would creep up on me, and somebody will be trying to figure out how to cut my mic off and cut my screen off so everybody can go home. But anyway, so we're going to have a good time today. As Bill put in the writing, we're going to talk a little bit about spiritual vision. And Hannah actually gave a good segue. She talked about Emerson. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ralph Waldo Emerson. He liked to be called Waldo, so that's what we're going to call him. We're going to call him Waldo. But something else I want to add, and where I developed my love for Emerson, was I actually just graduated in June from Holmes School of Spiritual Institute Consciousness of Spiritual Studies. Consciousness studies. Now I don't even know which one it is. But so I did finished Unity Masters of Divinity in 22, and in 23 I did home. So I developed a love for the pre-Socratic Greek philosophers and Emerson. So we're going to touch on that today. But just to begin with a story about spiritual vision, I had to go in for my annual eye exam. And I just changed. I work for a military contractor. I'm a financial counselor. And so we're changing contractors. And so I had to finish using all my benefits for the old contractor so I could move into the new one. And so I needed an eye exam. And I was visiting my mother in Atlanta. And I realized my date was coming. So I said, let me just pick a new provider in the Atlanta area. So I go to the new provider. And long story short, he decides that the place I've been going in Birmingham is my prescription's too strong, and that I don't need all that power to see. And so I was like, interesting. So he gave me a contact lens to put on and to try it out. And it was fine. The contact lens was fine. And so he says, let's just try this out. So he gives me this new prescription. And I literally went from 2.5 to 1.5. If any of you who worn glasses, that's huge. That's a pretty big jump. So I take my prescription and I go to Walmart to fill it, and I give it to the technician. And the first thing he says is, he's moving you from 2.5 to 1.5. He says it like he's my friend, like we've been friends all along, and he's so concerned about me. And so I said, okay, maybe I do have a new friend. I said, exactly. That's what I said too. And so he said, wow, that's just big. That's just big. And I said, well, I have two pairs of glasses. Do you think I should change the prescription and the other pair of glasses too? And so he pauses. I love the way he pauses, like we've known each other for so long, and he wants me to have the best. He goes, I don't think I would do that. And I said, why? He said, you might not like it. And I said, you might be right. He said, it might be too much. It might be too little. You should just wait and see. And I love that he cared so much about me. But what it really triggered in me is that this was more of a spiritual transformation than a physical. It was showing the out picturing in my vision, but this was about me being able to see things spiritually, and like not needing so much of what's needed in the world, but relying more upon an inner vision, an inner understanding. And so the question I asked myself was, will I be able to accept and understand and discern what's coming forward for me to take hold of, for me to release, for me to take in? And so even though we were talking about physical vision, to me, it took a turn into something much more spiritual. And there were, like I said, I moved for military contractors. And so I moved not from I moved just from not only my vision, but I was a financial counselor for the military for 15 years. And all of a sudden I became a regional supervisor. And they offered it to me 3 times and I turned it. I'm good at being a counselor. Leave me alone. Quit calling me about this, And so the third time when the lady called, she says to me, and once again, I don't know this lady on that level. I turned it down again and she said, Sandra, God keeps coming to you and you keep sending God away. I said, how dare you talk to me that way? And so I was like, you're not going God on me. And she says, well, I got to do something. And so once again, I don't know her like that. And I was like, and I thought about the optometrist. And I said, I'm being called to step on another level, step into some new understanding and not be so tied to what I knew. The vision has changed. I have to change. We can have all these beliefs, as Bill was just saying. There's a biblical scholar, Robert Tillage, and he says that until a belief becomes a conviction to do something, it's not a belief. It's just an idea rolling around in your head. But if it doesn't make you do anything or be different, then it doesn't count as a belief because it's not making you do anything different. And so I thought about Heraclitus. He was one of the pre-Greek philosophers, and Heraclitus, he was the one that was known for the saying, "The only change is constant." A lot of us don't know that. Heraclitus said, a lot of you probably think your grandmothers made that up. I thought my grandmother made it up, but Heraclitus did that, and that was back in 5 BC. And so what we have here is Heraclitus says, don't be like the children of your parents. Ooh, what does that mean? Don't be like the children of your parents. Meaning, in order to have new vision and see things in a new way, we can't be so attached to the idea of where we come from in the world, what we come into, what they taught us. You ever heard the story about the people that would take the turkey or the hen or whatever it was, and they kept cutting off the behind of it and stick it in the pot, and nobody ever asked Mama, why do you cut the behind off? And then because now it's, things evolve, we got bigger pots, and people had bigger pots still cutting off the behind. Grandma cut off the behind because her pot was small. Her pot wasn't big enough. And we were buying bigger pans from Williams and Sonoma and Macy's, and we were still cutting off the behind because that's what she did. And so Heraclitus was saying, stop, assess. No matter what they taught you and what they did, does that make sense for who you are, who we are, and what we're moving into, what our growth is? I thank the Baptist Church because they gave me a lot of good foundational tools. One of the things I love the most is I'm very comfortable with the Bible, but New Thought gave me a greater understanding of what those words meant, what those things meant. And so that's a good part of my spiritual understanding, and the idea that I'm not caught in what I was taught. I learned a phrase that Ernest Holmes coined. Chalmers Troward probably has one of my first favorite phrases. A principle is not bound by precedent. But Ernest Holmes has one I found. We need more backbone and less wishbone. We need more backbone and less wishbone. I love that because a lot of times in New Thought, I think we do a little spiritual malpractice. We forget that it's not enough to just set the vision. You gotta be intentional. You have to go forward. We are examples oftentimes for what other people see in the spiritual walk. And I think some of what we're suffering with now, or why we seem like the churches won't grow and why people won't come, we're not really stepping into that vision of what we've been given and what we understand, because we've read all the books. That's one of the things about most of the New Thought people. Not only have we read all the books, most of us are reading about 3 books at a time. And I don't even know how you do that, but we're pulling it off. But are we really taking those principles and embodying them? So I'm going to bring in a quote from Charles Fillmore as well. In the universal mind principle, when Jesus called the Father, there is a substance that also includes the mother, or seed of all visible substance. It is the only real substance because it is unchangeable. While the visible substance is in constant transition. While the visible substance is in constant transition. That reminds me of something I studied when I studied the Upanishads, the idea of the absolute and the relative. The bottom of the sea would represent the absolute, where things appear not to be changing, but the power of the sea is at the bottom of the sea. At the top is where the waves crash and they go back and forth upon each other. And that's the way we are in our daily life. We get fixated on ideas people tell us. They might be downsizing. I might be serving you with papers. You might be getting a foreclosure. These are all the things in the relative, but they have nothing to do with the identity we hold in the absolute. We are still whole beings no matter what happens. And when we take that vision and we hold that vision, then we don't get confused about what we see in our daily living, in our absolute. I don't care what happens in your daily life, wholeness is still wholeness, and it stays wholeness. Now let's get back to the idea of the I. I want to bring in a poem, an essay rather, I studied by Waldo Emerson back from 1841, and the title of it was Circles. And he begins the essay with the idea of the I. He says the I is the first circle. What it forms on the horizon is the second circle. And the third circle is what it creates, what it keeps creating every day. And that goes back to the idea of not being like the children our parents raised. What are we creating every day from our formative foundation years that we're not stopping to reassess? If change is the only constant, then that change also abides within us. So Emerson talks about these three ideas of the circle. And so it got me thinking about what is a circle? What does a circle mean? Because St. Augustine reminded us that God is the center of a circle with no circumference. So that means everything, that God is at the center of everything. And so that made me think of Matthew 6:33, where it says, seek ye first the kingdom and all its righteousness, and all other things will be added unto you. So that means when you get at that center of that circle, that's an attracting statement. If I get at the center of the circle, everything I need comes to me. But most of us do it backwards. We go get all the stuff, and then we get in the center of the circle and go, well, why am I not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? Why is this not working? I spend a lot of time on this and a lot of money on this. I'm not understanding that we get in the center, seek ye first the kingdom, and then magically, and it's not magic because we got to stop saying things like that, but principally, everything just comes to us. And that's where I find it. Now that I just get in the center and stay in the center, things come to me. People come and tell me things. I share ideas with me. And all I did was stand here at the center. And it makes life so much more enriching and less tiresome. And I'm not somewhere trying to figure out how to recover from everything because I'm trying to be, what's that phrase, FOMO, fear of missing out? There is no missing out when you're in the center. Anyway, that brought out the nerd in me. And I was like, well, let's break down what a circle means. We're gonna bring in a little math, not enough to make you mad on Sunday morning or send Bill nasty emails, worse yet me, but just a little math. So I started thinking about, you got a circle, and so your diameter runs through the middle of the circle. So if the circumference is nowhere, that means the diameter is nowhere. And same with the radius. The radius is from the center of the circle to the end of the circle. So once again, the radius is nowhere. These things go in relation with the circumference. But then I started thinking about, what's a tangent? A tangent is a line that touches 2 points on the circle, and then it goes off in whatever direction it wants to. Now, how many of us have done that? How many of us heard the phrase, they went off on a tangent? I was like, now that makes sense. Meaning, I accept that there's some power in that circle, but I still think I know better. I know more. So I'm gonna read half of a book. I'm gonna go half into my practice, and then I'm going off on my own. I got this thing. And so you go off on a tangent. And you stay there. And because they're not embodying the very idea of what it means. And then let's think about a chord. Yeah, I got deep with all this nerdiness. So a chord comes into the circle, but it won't come into the center of the circle. So it hangs out at the top or it hangs out at the bottom, but it still doesn't come into the full embodiment of the center. So it still doesn't get the idea of it. It's still not living that optimal life, that fulfilled life, that power-filled life. It's still saying, I know more than all there is. And we've all been there, we've all done that, we've all seen other people. If you don't know anybody that did it, then you're probably the one that's always doing it. So you got to keep all that in mind. And then you even think about the arc. The arc gets right in there in the circumference. It sits in the outer part of the circle. But once again, it doesn't come into the circle. It doesn't come into the center of it. And so once again, you can play all these parts, and we can play, because all we're doing is playing ourselves. But until we come into the fullness, and it doesn't matter the denomination. The more I study I've studied the Quran, I've studied Kabbalah. The more I study, the more I see it ain't that difficult, and we're all going in the same direction. We have different rituals we embody, but they all get us to that place of, I think it's Buddhism, moksha, where we're just trying to be in that place where we're eternally fed, we're eternally optimal, we are at peace, we are of the absolute, and so we don't need to run. So the idea of the circle, and I'll finish up with this part, the idea of the circle is wholeness. Once I'm whole, I'm always whole. But undivided can also look like wholeness. A circle can be undivided, but when I broke it down, undivided means I'm still missing pieces. It has the appearance of wholeness. Wholeness means there are no missing pieces. There are no missing pieces. So I didn't take all my abandonment issues and then just stick them with my triggered issues, no healing. And then I just stick them together and I look whole, but then I'm walking around bleeding on everybody, and that's no good. But wholeness means I'm always doing my work. What I love about the New Thought teachings is everything we do for ourselves, we help everybody. We help everybody because we create that sacred space for everyone to step into and be who they need to be. So that's why the wholeness doesn't care if, like I said, you get a foreclosure notice or a summons to appear or default notice or even a divorce notice. You're still whole. You just got to go within and reaffirm, re-edify who you are. But undivided can be a tricky looking thing. It can look one way, but it's not showing the best of you going within and replenishing yourself. I have a friend that I met in the ACIM group. I'm not gonna say her name, but she used to. She was a white woman, and as she grew in her spiritual teachings, she used to hate going back home for Thanksgiving and listening to the homophobic slurs and the gender slurs and all the slurs. And so she said she's sitting there one holiday, and she just couldn't take it anymore, and she hollers out, "Stop it! You're better than that! Stop it!" And she says, and they all just look up and their eyes get big because this has been going on for decades. Like, who are you to tell us? Why are you talking to us like this? But she said something shifted and something changed. And it made her very, very happy. It made her very, very happy. And so what I'm challenging you now is when you run into people's family members or sometimes yourself, stop it. You're better than that. No one's going to tell you, no, I'm not. I'm not better than that. I'm really worse than that. And I'm telling you now, if they tell you that, run, because that's just scary. That's really, really scary. But this is that when we want to step into that vision, because the thing about the vision changes. Just like the absolute and the relative, things are changing all the time. But what we can take pleasure in and hope in and faith in is that we're better than that. And meditation and prayer pulls us back into it. And things such as you can tell yourself at the store on work, stop it, Sandra. You're better than that. Step into that higher vision. Step into that wholeness. Step into that knowing. And in that way, we're always a walking example for all that ever was, all that will ever be, and all that will be going forward. I thank you for allowing me this time to share with you. And so it is.